Before I dive into these 5 tips, it's kind of crucially important to understand my story of getting to where I am now. The journey to get here has influenced my thought on this question very, very greatly. And the important thing to realize is that after spending 4 years in school, I didn't go into engineering straight away. In fact, my first consistent gig in tech was working as a support engineer in customer support. I was a CSR at the time, or a customer support representative. And my job was to be at the end of those emails and phone calls to help people with their questions about the technology and the product we were selling. More often than not though, it wouldn't just be questions, it would also involve, being with customers through some heated moments as maybe our product wasn't working the way that they wanted it to. Alas, at the end of the day, it was my job to help guide them through those processes and those questions to give them the answers and solutions that they needed. Now this job was pretty interesting because even though it was in tech, I found that the most knowledge I was using from my post-secondary career was my class in philosophy, because in that class you learn all about logical arguments. If A then B, ordering your premises, coming to a logical conclusion. Basically, how to present facts and arguments to answer questions or show what you were thinking. And this was crucial because day in, day out, I would write hundreds of responses to tickets, emails, and be on lots of phone calls just answering people's questions and try to get them the answers that they need. It was an exercise in writing and expressing my thoughts and ideas. But it wasn't always great. We would come to the point where I didn't know the answer to a question, or I've exhausted my abilities in troubleshooting a problem or knowing what to do next. At this point, as a CSR or a support agent, you need to do something called an escalation, or escalate your ticket to the next tier of support. In my case, as a CSR, I would get escalated to a TSE, or a technical support engineer. Now, when you're doing an escalation, one thing you have to provide is something called escalation notes. Think of escalation notes like a sticky note that you staple to the front of your ticket, the question that you have, before you slide it over to them. Your escalation notes are crucial to a TSE because that's the first thing they look at to gain context and get the initial details they need to take their ticket and carry it to completion. One thing you learn very quickly as a CSR is the value of writing good escalation notes, because a bad set of escalation notes will mean that the TSE will just bust down the ticket back to you and say, this needs more information, I need to know more about this, or come on man, do better. However, good escalation notes, notes that don't require the TSE to ask more easy questions or basically have to come back to you for any more information, means that your ticket gets resolved much faster, which is a triple win for you, your customer, and the TSE. Second thing that I learned about doing good escalation notes is that if you do this consistently, the TSEs end up giving those questions back to you and giving you the answers in the background so that you can answer these questions yourself. To me, this helped me out a lot in support because that meant that I could start learning how to do harder and more complex cases, which helped me be a better support engineer, but it also helped my team as well because when my team had questions, they could ask me and I could answer it as opposed to escalating it up. Basically, writing better escalation notes not only helped me, but my team as well. And this is important to keep in mind. So after I did, hundreds and thousands of tickets in my multiple years in support, I switched over to engineering. In addition to realizing that the job is different, I noticed that escalations were not a thing, or not a formal thing. People had questions, they would ask them, sometimes you get answers, sometimes you need to ask other people for questions, but asking and answering questions was a much more organic process, which is not a bad thing. But I started thinking, what if I applied the same logic and principles I did to writing escalation notes to the questions that I would ask? And secondly, I wonder if this would help me with my crippling imposter syndrome. So here are my 5 tips for asking better questions as a junior engineer. Tip 0 is to write your question while thinking about how the person receiving it would interpret it. Tip number 1, what is the problem? What's going wrong? What is the issue? As the person answering your questions, I would love it if I could have a one-liner telling me what you're dealing with right now or what the problem is. It doesn't matter how small or how big your problem is, you need to boil down the most important points into a single sentence and present that as your initial statement. This is the starting point for everything else that comes afterwards. The second thing I need to know is, why is this important? What is the context? As the person answering your question, I need to know not only where you are, but where you need to go. what is the question your customer has? What is the problem they're trying to solve? Because I am the person that can give you what you need to get there, or at least point you in the right direction. Having that makes it much easier because it's just making a line as opposed to plain 22 questions and trying to figure out where you need to go. The third thing I need to know is, what have you already tried and what have you already researched? This is good for obvious reasons because it shows that you're putting in the effort, but more importantly, it tells me where not to look. It tells me what you've probably already tried so I can look elsewhere and get you an answer faster. The next thing I need to know is, what would you try doing next? Obviously, as a person answering your question, tells me, oh, okay, so maybe that's something I could try, or maybe I have more information on that. But more importantly, as a person answering your question, it allows me to coach you better. It can let me tell you if you're on the right track and that your instincts are good and keep going, or maybe not, maybe you missed the mark a little bit. And here's what I would actually start looking into next. If you do this as the asker and especially as the answerer, you build up the critical reasoning and thinking skills in the people that are asking you these questions. The last thing I want to know is, how can I help you better? And you might be wondering, that's a weird question. Obviously, the best way to help me is if you can just answer my question. But more specifically, is there a better means for me helping you? For example, there are times where a junior or people on my team or someone else will ask a question where I'm like, I know the answer. I can help them out really quickly, but I'm just in a call right now. I just don't have enough time. I want to help them though. If you can tell me that you're free in the next 10 minutes or that you're ready to jump on a video call that will be much faster, like maybe 5 minutes, or that you're available in an hour, that allows me to think, okay, I can help them, maybe not right now, but maybe I'll jump on a call, maybe I'll talk to them in an hour, and that'll make sure you actually get a response as opposed to it just getting lost in the chat thread or buffer. So here's an example of how to ask a good question as a junior engineer. This is exactly how I asked a question in the last week. Hey y'all, does anybody know how to decrease the retention window in Prometheus server? I need to decrease the retention window because right now the disk is full and it's leading to metrics not flowing to Grafana. I've already tried making edits to the Helm charts, but they don't seem to be sticking. I'm thinking the next thing I'm probably gonna try is just doing a kubectl edit. Is that the best way? If anyone's around, I'm happy to jump on a huddle, but I'll also be free for a Google Meet in 20 minutes. 5 tips. I guarantee that if you do these 5 tips, you will ask much better questions as a junior engineer, and you will be much more better received by the rest of your team. Because as much as people tell you that there's no such thing as a dumb question, there is a difference between a poorly researched question and a well thought out one. So let me know if those tips help. Tell me if you agree, tell me if you disagree, tell me if there's anything you'd add or change. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, or you can feel free to tweet at me as well. My Twitter info is down there. But hope you enjoyed it. Stay safe. See you in the next video.